And welcome back to Baseball Barbacast. I am now very excited to be joined by Mr. Nate Tice, one of the newest members of the Yahoo Sports team. Nate, welcome. This is your Barbacast debut, and we are actually going to talk about some football, which you're not going to hear very often on this show, but we are making an exception. So, Nate, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me. What a host. You're just like, hey, you don't care about those vegetables. Let's have the meat. You know, let's just focus on that. You're an Atkins guy, right? Let's just focus on that. I will say it wasn't my first exposure to your guys' podcast. I've been a fan for a few years, so I'm very excited about this. But you had to, I think they posted a thing where they had a player in each jersey from each team. Mm-hmm. And I think you had to name it off. And I felt like you did a pretty dang good job, except there was one I remember I was screaming as I was watching that. I was like, come on, Buddha Baker. Buddha Baker.
Oh, yes.
Buddha Baker.
The graphic that was basically hyping up the NFL season. And yes. Jake and I, who have essentially stopped following football closely 10 years ago. And so but listen, we are just American, white guys. So stuff seeps through. You can only avoid so much if you're going to be online in the year 2024. So some of the football players do make it into our consciousness. But the reason why we are bringing you here today, I know if you're watching, you're saying, "Oh, well, he's wearing a Mariners hat." Of course, you bring on this fellow M supporter. No, it's not. Nate, listen, he has other positive qualities here that we want to have him on the show for.
No, we're talking about the double. Yeah. That's why I'm here. We're going to relive the double.
Listen, that's possibly will happen on a future podcast. But the reason I've invited you here today, Nate, is to talk about kind of the topic and our focus for this week, which is the MLB Draft Combine. And you, as someone who comes from the football world, has grown up in this football space, the NFL Combine is something that has just kind of been something that has fascinated me from a distance as someone who hasn't even followed football that closely. And now, as MLB embarks on just its fourth ever draft combine for its own sport, I thought it'd be a good idea to bring you here on the show and do a little compare and contrast and kind of ask some questions about what a combine that has been around for decades actually looks like and what the goals are for a combine in, of course, America's number one sport. So let's start with the I guess a very basic question for you, which is what are your earliest my understanding is that the combine stretches back to the 80s, but this is a thing that has been relevant in your life as a football person, observer, player for, I imagine, a very long time. Is that accurate?
My entire memory, as far as I can remember, as far as my first memory of Chuck E. Cheese third birthday. The combine's been around, but it really took a newer life, a newer importance, I would say, in the late 90s and mid-late 90s. And that's when players realized they could train for it and go, hey, we know what we're getting tested on. Why not practice it for 3 months? And so you saw some shifts and changes of that. Early 2000s, kind of the same. And then mid-late 2000s, like a lot of things with the NFL, it was, what's another event that we can make money on? Mm-hmm. And so that's the shift to prime time. That's the shift of the dates of everything. That is the changing of the focus of what they're showing, like how the emphasis of everything. But I think the 40-yard dash is the big event at the combine. But I actually always think the thing that is most important about the NFL combine is the medicals and the interviews. Because now you're getting everybody in one spot with the same doctors, getting all the, vigorous tests. These guys are in there for hours. And I actually feel bad for the players. They've done a little bit better job the last few years to make it a little easier on them. But that is the main thing of the combine, is medicals and interviews with decision makers.
Yes.
Not any of the on-field stuff. We have this thing called tape. And that's what I think is ironic with the baseball one. I'm sure we're going to talk about this. Yeah. You guys have more data than anybody.
Absolutely.
What do you need a combine for?
Absolutely.
Just watch them run from home to first. We got the time there.
To that point, though, you kind of jumped ahead to one of my next questions about what is the most important part, because the NFL Combine and what baseball is hoping to create, the MLB Combine is a television event with events and more glorified batting practice or bullpen sessions from guys with all the TrackMan data that's actually televised, because that is in some ways a new thing to kind of be showing that in a practice setting for amateur prospects. I would say that is relatively fresh, but I think you're already jumping at what I've already heard in the first few years of the MLB Combine. This will be the first one I'm attending, but talking to people around the industry, they'll tell you the same thing. It's about getting the kids in the room to understand what they're about and the medical stuff that they undergo, to your point, kind of streamlining the whole process to where we feel like we are comfortable with what we are selecting. And of course, with the base, this is of course a different system in terms of negotiating draft bonuses, signing bonuses in baseball versus football, which I'm sure has a lot to do with that as well. But back to that interview process. When is that something that you feel like has always been true? Do you feel like that now there is more emphasis on that from a character focus standpoint, from a work ethic focus standpoint, and all that makeup and all that off the field intangible stuff that is so hard for us to sometimes talk about, yet we all acknowledge is very important? Is that a relatively recent thing, or do you think that was true back to the 90s as well?
It's always been true. I would say too, I have found, I think everybody's found in the NFL too, is now the players are aware. So they get coached up by agents. They get coached up. So now it's become this whole game of, now you got teams asking weird questions, just trying to like throw them for a loop, trying to get them off the script. And then now it's a whole new game than it was maybe 10, 15 years ago. Everybody just gets trained at the stuff. So there's a lot of money involved. So you're going to get coached up and trained up. There's also now what we're finding is more player empowerment, which I'm a big supporter of. Like I always am fine with players taking it into their own hands. Like I'm always about that. So you see Marvin Harrison Jr. just going, I'm not working out. I'm not meeting with anybody. Or Caleb Williams going, who was the number one pick with the Bears, going, I'm only meeting with the Bears. Sorry, guys. Like, I know you're not drafting me. Like, but 5 years ago, I would even say 10 years ago, especially, but 5 years ago, no one was doing that. Like, then now we're seeing guys skip bowl games. Now it's trickling into the training process before the draft. So that's been kind of the newer development, I would say, is now we're adding into this. Players aren't doing certain tests too. Like, they're just going, why would I do a 3-cone drill if you're dinging me for my agility? Like, and I get it. I would do the exact same thing. It's frustrating for me as an evaluator, but I get why they're doing it. I would do the same thing. So I think now that interview process has always been huge. You're getting guys in the same room. It's the head coach, usually the GM, maybe a couple other personnel guys. You got coordinator. Say if you have say you're interviewing the offensive lineman, you'll have the coordinator, the offensive line coach, and you get kind of that, herd, a 5-on-1 kind of thing going on there. Oh, that question's a good question. I'm going to go off of this, or I'm going to throw him for a loop, as opposed to maybe just a 1-on-1 with the scout.
Sure.
Because then there's the other thing, and this is what I've always gone into, and the NFL draft process is exhausting as far as just the narrative and just the discourse and everything. Is, sources say this, or this coach says this. Who's watching the Watchmen? Who's sourcing the sources? So a guy might go, oh, player's lazy, all that. It's like, well, one guy might say that. And then you talk to 9 other guys and they're like, he's awesome. But that's a huge thing why you want to get in a group setting. Because one guy might just hate the player and the others might love him, or vice versa. So I think that's a huge thing too, is then you can start seeing biases kind of get deflated or inflated because of the interview process.
I want to tie this back to the combine, but what you just described, what kind of drives me crazy as someone who doesn't even actually have to follow football, but because, as I mentioned earlier, it's hard to avoid. There is so much time between the end of the games and the draft. And this is something that in baseball actually wasn't as much of an issue until it was pushed back to the All-Star game, right? Previously, for years, the draft was at the beginning of June. Now, that created some other issues, notably in the college season, is that it was happening in the middle of the college postseason, which was problematic for other reasons. So I think am a proponent of pushing it farther back beyond the end of the college season. However, we got Omaha going on, and there's still going to be another few weeks. And so now for the past few years, we have also kind of, as a baseball industry, gone through the same process of, you just got a month sitting around, everyone just talking in circles, and you end up with these rumors about where guys want to go, where guys are preferred to go, what teams like this guy. And I imagine it's clearly that times a billion with football. And so I imagine that is, first of all, exhausting. That's the word you just used to describe the process.
It's exhausting.
Yeah. And it just seems so goofy when I just see, again, even tangentially, the amount that changes about the way people evaluate these quarterbacks or whatever in the months since they've played a game.
It's insane. It's insane.
It's wild.
This year for me was Drake May from North Carolina was my number one player.
Yeah.
I think he's fantastic. And I think Caleb Williams was my 1B. But then Jaden Daniels made a huge push, ended up being the number 2 pick from LSU, going to the Washington Commanders. And nothing happened in 3 months. Not a ball was thrown. No one ran a 40. No one did an interview. And the discourse that came from that was, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, what? Did I miss something? I tried to be very good at kind of my independent view of somebody, and then I'll talk to people. And I'm like, is May an asshole? Like, is he just
has he pissed off too many of the wrong people that have nothing to do with this? Right.
And everyone's like, no, he's awesome. He's great. I'm just like, what's going on then? And but that's what happens. And then you get the narrative off the narrative, and then you get, oh my God, the reply to the reply to the reply to the reply. And then it's like, it usually circles all the way back. But yeah, I agree with you. But it's how that has to happen in the NFL. And they want an event every month. So I agree with you. It's
however,
tiring.
It is exhausting. And of course, it's all on a smaller scale to baseball. And I understand it. And in some ways, I'm grateful that, those conversations are, although it'd be kind of fun to turn on ESPN.
You guys have stats at least.
Yeah.
Like that's true. For me, 3,500 yards, throwing for 3,500 yards in Pac-12 is different than throwing 3,500 yards in the MAC.
Sure. Now, tying this back to the combine, though, then where are the gains to be made, right? Because a lot of the top players, as you said, and we've seen this already in baseball too, we'll see this at the combine this week, a lot of the top picks, because they know they're top picks, I'm not going to take BP. I'm not going to throw a bullpen. What's the point? I've already proven myself. And I can't blame the player whatsoever. So at least in a football context, and I'm curious if you're curious in a baseball context, we're still figuring this out. Where are the gains to be made? Outside of the interviews where you blow the front office away, oh, this guy's brilliant, oh, he's incredibly driven, blah, blah, blah. On the field, how much of a difference does that stuff actually make? Like, can guys actually jump 2-3 rounds with their draft stock for what they do in a 3-cone drill? Like, that's something that is very difficult. Or how many bench press, that's something that I still can't wrap my mind around. Is that nonsense? Does that not actually happen? Or are there some cases where that's possible?
You're asking me who thinks it's nonsense. I think people, even people I respect and people in the league, take it way too far. I think even bowl games, all-star games, like Senior Bowl and everything.
Sure.
Everyone's going, whoa, he showed up for 3 days there. And I was like, yeah, I got 24 games I can watch.
Right. That's
like, I know
you're referring to like Senior Bowl practice. At least that's a game set.
Yeah, sorry.
Right?
Again, yes. I got to feel my audience.
No,
yes,
okay.
the Senior Bowl practice. Yeah, so it's an all-star game between, now it's all classes. But yeah, it's great for small school guys. I would say that's where the combine is big. So this year we had Quinyon Mitchell, who got drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles. He was from Toledo. Max school.
Action, baby.
Pretty
love it.
Yeah, pretty good year. He's a corner. Okay, but he looked like the best player on the field when you're watching him. But then that's a guy like that. That's where the gains are, because then he goes to the combine, runs a 4.4, jumps out of the gym.
Okay,
and then you're like,
so then he physically matches up. Right.
He's an NFL athlete. That's what we are confirming. Mm-hmm. But then there's other guys you're like, oh, this guy, Xavier Worthy from Texas, set the record for the fastest 40.
Right.
I knew he was fast.
Right.
So what's the difference between 4.3 and 4.21? I knew, I know he was small and fast. So for me, a lot of times the film is the test, the film is the answer, and it just takes time. And a lot of film watching takes time, and not a lot of people want to do that. And so I think that's what people use the combine as a way to shortcut some things. But your original question just about the gains for me are interviews. I mean, that's it. It's a confirmation, maybe an outlier. So maybe you're like, is this guy, a good example is Jalen Polk. He's a receiver from University of Washington. He's now with the New England Patriots. Goes in the second round. I love him, but I'm like, how fast is he? I think he's going to run like okay, I just want to make sure.
That one you didn't necessarily know how fast. Right.
Yes. Yeah. I'm like, I think he's okay, but if he runs a 4.6, that's a little scary now.
Okay.
But then he goes out, runs like a 4.51. Okay, check. We're good. That's kind of where maybe some gains are. It's just like, are you okay? Okay, good. You're not an outlier.
To your point though, the 40-yard dash, which we're referring to, right? Like still seems like the one that we are paying the most attention to. And it's easy. It's one of the easiest ones to understand. I can't imagine that many even hardcore football fans know what a fast 3-cone drill. Maybe I'm wrong. Know what a fast 3-cone
No, you're right.
Or even a vertical jump or a broad jump.
Nope, they don't.
Right. And so, but are there beyond the 40? What are some of the events that you've seen guys get more attention for or raise their draft stock? You mentioned some of those 3-cone drills. Maybe there is something with the agility there. Are there other ones that stand out in terms of on-field stuff?
No, that's a great question. Offensive line would be, they have a movement drill, a wave drill. And so you can see foot quickness and see those guys
when they're enormous.
Yeah, and when they're enormous, you want to see typewriter feet, dancing bears.
Yes.
That's one. So I was like, oh man, he's kind of heavy-footed. That's what we thought. All right. Or wow, look at that. He moved a little. Okay, I got to go check the tape again. He moved a little better. Another one is receivers or pass catchers. They have a thing called the gauntlet drill, which is you run a straight line. You have like 5 or 6 quarterbacks throwing balls left, right, left, right. You just have to sprint across the field. That is one because now we have GPS tracking. And it is Puka Nacua from the Rams. This is going to be a story that everyone's going to talk about for 20 years now because it's like Jerry Rice running a 4.7 40, is that he didn't run a great 40, but then he ran the fastest gauntlet drill, which is that meant he was able to adjust to a ball and keep his speed.
Keep his speed while he was moving. Got it.
While he was moving and adjusting for throws, left, right, and going full speed, he had the highest GPS score. So now that we have that, that's become more of a relevant drill because of the GPS stuff.
Just to be clear, that's because you were tracking his speed, is what you're saying. Yes. That's what GPS score is what that's referring to, basically.
Yes, you're tracking actual miles per hour.
Yes,
that the guy is
while you are doing those
while
movements.
He's moving and adjusting and actually doing real football things, like catching a football, not just running in a straight line.
True. However, catching footballs from 5 different quarterbacks over the span of 30 seconds is kind of goofy. Like that's kind of
goofy, right? Don't give me the drills, man.
That's not really a live game situation.
So many quarterback gurus I watch on Twitter, and they have these quarterbacks doing the stupidest things I've ever seen. Everyone goes, "God, that's a great drill." He'll never do that in a game. When do you see a quarterback turning his back completely to the defense and then turning around throwing? It's like, no, there's other things you can do. Sorry. I can go a whole rant about trainers and gurus and drills and everything.
Well, and this is something I also kind of wanted to get into, right? Is that so much energy is spent on the quarterbacks, understandably, right? There's no equivalent to that in other sports. And as much as I can, continue to ignore football, I'll continually recognize that how does anyone function if you don't have there's no equivalent to that is having in baseball. There's nothing like it, right? Have this one player. And so obviously that is where all the attention is going to go. And so you see them making throws. I mean, I remember maybe this is not a combine memory, but when I think back to when I cared about football, I remember Jamarcus Russell throwing a ball, whatever was it, 80 yards, 90 yards on a knee, or what was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was 80 yards on a knee. Yeah.
80 yards on a knee. I don't know.
Which I saw, I've seen in person because I went to a camp where he did that. It's pretty impressive. Not gonna lie.
I don't know if that was a combine thing or not, but again, I would imagine with the quarterbacks, that's something that that is where the microscope is just, the magnifying glass, everything is just like the body language, even in a workout, people are losing their mind over. Insane. And I have to imagine that you have to kind of pull yourself back and say, you just said, I just spent hours and hours watching this guy play football games. What am I doing? But
why do I care about him throwing on air with I don't like it, and it's hard for me to go, hey, I'm a serious analyst. Mm-hmm. And there you go. You don't care about combine drills? Well, it's grain of salt. Grain of salty.
Right. But,
it's a disconnect. Yeah.
Right. But I'm back to where you can make gains. Because again, like quarterbacks, it feels like, man, like a term I've keep using in a bunch of contexts, like the hay is in the barn, I would assume. You get to the combine. I would hope. I would like to think that it couldn't change that much of a difference. Not that the interviews are not important, but I guess what I'm leading to, I guess my last question, big picture about the combine is, what is your favorite part? And I imagine you've attended. I don't know how many times you've attended. I don't know.
12?
Did you? 12, forgive me for not. Did you attend this as a player?
No. I was. I have this helmet, but that was barely used.
Okay,
I know. I was Russell Wilson's backup, so yeah, I was.
Listen. I know we weren't throwing for 7,000 yards at Wisconsin,
we were not.
I was just
running a little bit.
I don't know how many people were get actually invited to this combine.
I went. So when I finished playing, I was a graduate assistant at Pitt, University of Pittsburgh, and then my second year there was my first combine. It was kind of because it's a convention for the people in the industry. Your meetings, that's maybe the best part of the combine. To kind of answer that question is it's a convention. It's networking. It's meeting with new people. It's seminars. It's all these things. And that is really what I think is the best part of the combine is that seeing the people, seeing friends I see once a year. It's usually the Super Bowl and the combine. So I think that really is just seeing those types of people, especially what combine has become now, because it's not all the guys skipping tests and everything. It kind of changes the math on all.
Sure. It's basically the football version of the winter meetings, right? For baseball, we have that, in December that's in the off season as well. Yep. Same kind of thing. I know it's in Indy every year, which is cool. Then I guess I would say too, just spinning it forward, because baseball is still in its infancy with this event. Do you imagine the combine change it? Like, is this what do you think the next era of this event is? Like, is there something where we start to see more? You mentioned that the gauntlet. I don't know how recent of an institution that is. I mean, is the league trying to come up with a more listen, it's football. People are going to care no matter what. So it's not like they have to get more attention on it. But is there any talk about changing any part of it for any sort of reason, whether it helps the teams or whether it helps the players?
Yeah. Well, first off, they're talking about like maybe moving it. And that's kind of cost something. Indy's a great spot for it because you can walk everywhere. Everything's connected and everything. But that's the NFL going, who's going to pay us the most money? And that's what they do. But I think they're trying to make it more player friendly. I already mentioned some of the schedule stuff. They used to be long days for these guys. They're trying to make it more, hey, we're going to work around your guys' stuff. Scouts don't want to do the combine. They go straight to another pro day. Like they don't want to do two. But that's what's happening. They have to now because no one's doing the combine. They want to go on their home, get some home cooking, get another couple of weeks to get better, even better shape, rest up a little bit after the season. So they're trying, but it's hard. It's pulling teeth. They're trying to change the drills to be more, and this is for teams to be more, translatable to actual football stuff, which I've liked because I used to think especially the offensive line drills were archaic, but now are much better, more updated. And I would say that they try to do that with a lot of positions. But again, it's all up to the players participating. And again, if you don't give them incentive to do that, you're only giving them negatives going, hey, you come in here and just get grilled. If I'm, Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm a top 15, top 20 pick, most likely. I get it. Like I get why not, but I will credit the NFL for trying. Even stuff like I mentioned the Senior Bowl earlier. It's not the seniors only anymore. It's juniors and sophomores can participate now because they're trying. They're like, hey, we can't just do seniors. That's something from the 80s. This is different. We have redshirt sophomores declaring. We have juniors declaring. We have small school juniors declaring. We got to see these guys. So they're trying, but it's the NFL and it's pulling teeth. But I will say that they are trying to do this. But I also wanted to say too is that I think the funniest part about all of this, and I mentioned I watch the tape and, oh, wow, it's crazy that, some of these guys get swayed by maybe just the combine stuff is, and I'm sure you get this in baseball, the hubris of some of these executives and coaches is maybe I think that way, but some of these guys say, man, that guy gave me a good handshake. Man, you see how he looked me in the eye? Wow. Man, he threw that.
You could see that
one ball.
Determination. You could feel that will to win.
And I wish an NFL is getting smarter, and I truly believe GMs are getting smarter. Yeah. But that is such a thing still in the NFL circles. Sure.
It's true in baseball.
And I know. And then there are some tangible things from that, as far as especially quarterback, maturity and all those things. But then there's also people that just take like one thing and just go, yep, that's my guy because of that. It's like the old, we're taking this guy in the first round because of batting practice, but I just, to me, it's insane. But I've seen some of the quarterbacks that got taken in this first round this last year. The hubris of some of these execs will never shock me.
Yeah. And obviously in baseball, there's so many other factors and risk profiles that some teams are going to be willing to dive into or not. But no, I'm sure that's true across all sports. I'm sure it's true in basketball too. I know the basketball combine's a whole other beast that I'm sure we could have a whole separate podcast about. But
basketball people do it, man.
And again, that's the thing. You only have two picks, right? Or one pick. And it's like the pressure
really
of that is even bigger because it's like you're expected to come in and contribute immediately. That's the thing with
that's
baseball.
What's so interesting with me. Baseball, I was going to say, is there's more positional stuff where offense and defense. Football, it's like, hey, receiver does this, offensive lineman does this. Everybody's so platooned and isolated. That's what's interesting to me with baseball. It's much more realistic. A guy might run and you go, maybe he could stay in the middle infield. Maybe he can't. That is interesting to me because you get small samples of that in football, but baseball, I feel like it's so much more open off of testing.
Well, and it's just the timeline, right? I mean, when you turn on the NFL draft, what does it say on the bottom? What does the team need?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you would just never see that in baseball because it doesn't make any sense. Now, I think that there's a little bit of that because you will see some teams sometimes horribly failing at this. For example, the Angels a couple years ago only drafted pitchers when their farm system needed pitchers, and they drafted a bunch of bad pitchers. But that's
the Patriots drafted all offense, so that's what's funny. I on our live show when I was with the Athletic, we did our draft show, and when the Patriots went all offense to help out the quarterback May, I was like, there's a baseball team that did this. And it was so okay. There was the Angels went all pitchers, right? Okay. All right.
Well, it was the Angels, and we called it the no-hitter. They drafted a no hitter. It was very, very impressive. But again,
not a perfect game.
No hitter, no, not quite. But that horribly backfired. And 20 rounds of a baseball draft used to be even longer. You have the opportunity to kind of diversify who you bring in, but with all the signing bonuses and all the different positions in high school versus college, and this guy's a senior, he's going to cost this much. This guy's a high schooler, he's going to cost this much.
He's committed to Oklahoma. Yeah, all that stuff.
It is even more complicated in some senses, but there's also a little bit more leeway because if you draft out a high schooler, maybe it might look bad, but you can still say, we're not expecting him to be in the big leagues next year. Whereas football, you don't really have that luxury to be like, don't worry, we'll send him to high A and we'll be patient with this.
Right. And how much turnover there is with football coaches.
Yeah.
So it's like, that plan sounds good for 4 months, but
I'm not going to be here.
That coach that we thought was developing him is now the head coach somewhere else, or he's fired, or that's the other thing with football. It's it's not for long. Yes. That's what NFL stands for. Yeah. So I forget about the baseball thing is that, you get the time, the development, all that stuff. I've always been fascinated about how they manage timelines because the depth of it is just always fascinating. Team building in all sports is fascinating to me. But the baseball one's always interesting.
Nate Tice, this has been a delight. Thank you so much for joining me and for giving us a little peek into the NFL Combine. Where can people find your work? I'm sure there are some people that listen to this show that enjoy a little American football every once in a while. So what are we working on now that that's part of the Yahoo team?
That has surprised me a little bit. I didn't realize how isolated some fans are, where they only focus on one sport. As someone that likes to consume all sports, football priority, but I mean, I watch a lot of baseball, a lot of basketball, a lot of cricket right now.
Yes,
it's actually I actually like it now that I know the rules. It's one of those sports where I'm like, shoot, I wish I got to play that because it's like right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
You can find me at Nate_Tice, Twitter. Plenty of football clips right now. I'm watching Bryce Young from the Panthers right now, but hasn't been a lot of fun because that offense is terrible. Then you can find you can read me at Yahoo Sports. You'll find that Bryce Young article soon and some other quarterbacks there. And
let me just say, if you heard Nate's talking about I just watched the tape. Just follow. If he's watching the tape, folks. He is sharing his work. So
that's all I got. That's all I got. It's just to show proof because there's a lot of people out there that say they watch the tape and I can tell are not watching the tape. So it's my way of having receipts and going when someone goes, "You never seen this guy play?" I go, "Yeah, I did."
You're like, "No, I've actually seen too much of this guy." So
I have. And then I'm in my own little lair here where I don't talk to anybody.
It's there. If you want to watch some very, very subtly impressive offensive line play, Nate_Tice has you covered. Nate, thank you so much. Your debut on Baseball Barbercast was delightful, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.